Other countries that were hit by the same bad guys went after the terrorists while still protecting the rights of their citizens. But the Bush team raised Americans' fear level as high as possible.
We will discover and destroy sleeper cells.
The government says because the 19 hijackers got into the country legally, investigators want to know if more terrorists have slipped in the same way.
Right after 9/11, the government created the Department of Homeland Security. And one of the first things it did was literally to create a way to manipulate the levels of our fear.
This is not uncommon. I wouldn't be so sure that the war on terror is real, but is also a hyped threat, right? Yellow, orange, red. Who does this? Who's really fighting terrorism? Does Israel do this? You know, they really have terrorists. And they don't say, it's an orange day, you know? Oops, it's red. You know, they're out there quietly trying to find these guys and prevent these attacks, right? And they take pride in not frightening the citizens, in having daily life go on without fear. Let me remind you of how did the National Socialists come to power?
In Berlin in 1933, the German parliamentary building, the Reichstag, was set on fire. Many historians say this was a staged attack, but it was a terrible shock to people's sense of security. The National Socialists seized on this to pass laws to subvert the German Constitution.
So they said, you're not patriotic unless you pass Clause 2 and later the Enabling Act. It means the state can open your mail. It means the state can listen to your phone calls. It means that you as Parliament give up much of your authority to the leader. And so that legal process prepared the way for everything that followed.
We see now in our own country legal maneuvers that undercut our civil liberties. By October 2001, the White House drove the USA Patriot Act through Congress. The Patriot Act is over 300 pages long. It weighed as much as a baby. It was printed at 3 in the morning, and they had to vote on it by 11 a.m. The Patriot Act gave the government access to wiretapping you, electronically surveilling you, researching your medical records, looking at your bank records, looking at your credit card statements, even looking at the books you checked out of the library, all without you ever having done anything wrong, and all without a warrant.
Today we take an essential step in defeating terrorism while protecting the constitutional rights of all Americans.
Congress passed a new law called the Uniting and Strengthening America by Providing Appropriate Tools Required to Intercept and Obstruct Terrorism Act of 2001. The Patriot Act. Sure is the axis of evil for bad acronyms.
The Patriot Act really opened the door for what followed. The administration used the cover of fighting terrorism to greatly expand intrusive federal law enforcement powers.
Our war on terror begins with Al-Qaeda, but it does not end there. It will not end until every terrorist group of global reach has been found, stopped, and defeated.
They scared us by invoking the greatest threats of all, the weapons of mass destruction and a false nuclear threat.
There is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction.
Remember the drumbeat, war in Iraq, we've got to invade, we've got to invade. Remember the yellow cake, thank you, in Niger.
The British government has learned that Saddam Hussein recently sought significant quantities of uranium from Africa.
Iraq has sent agents to Niger, and they are buying yellow cake, which is used in nuclear bombs, so that, as Condoleezza Rice put it memorably, we cannot wait for the smoking gun to come in the form of a mushroom cloud. This scared me. Did it scare you? No? Well, you're smarter than I am. But this was completely fake. And up and down, we now know, up and down the State Department, we're like, fake, fake, don't do it, don't do it. But they hyped this threat.
This government does not torture people.
We don't torture people. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, we don't torture people. Waterboarding, we do not. I don't talk about techniques, and we don't torture people. Now listen to me. I want you to listen to me.
The second thing that always happens in a closing society is to create a secret prison system outside the rule of law where torture takes place. And by secret, I mean unaccountable. Now, the White House has said for years, America doesn't torture. We know now that America tortures grievously. But now we know categorically that the torture was directed from the top, everything from directives to hang prisoners by their hands from the ceiling, electrodes on genitals, threats against family members, extremes of heat and cold, forced nakedness. These are tactics taken right from the Gulag. And we know there are black sites around the world where people are simply disappeared.
The secret prisons and Guantanamo became settings where U.S. agents tortured prisoners. The administration defended torture as being necessary to save American lives.
I wake up on November 14th, 2001, and I read in the Times that the president has issued what's called Military Order Number 1. And it is an order of the president's that he issues as the commander-in-chief, essentially says that the president can pick up any non-citizen anywhere in the world who the president thinks might be involved in terrorism.
The hunt is on. They're enemy combatants and terrorists who are being detained for acts of war against our country. And that is why different rules have to apply.
When people are unpopular, vilified, painted as devil, that's when rights get swept aside.
So the administration sought to redefine torture. John Yoo wrote a memo in 2002 that was a semantics game, a really evil semantics game that sought to redefine torture narrowly to just two criteria. One was organ failure, and the other was that severe pain and suffering must be inflicted with specific intent. And anything less than that did not, according to this memo, constitute torture.
Okay, look, you contributed to the writing of the 2002 memo. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
The memo was implemented at some point. Is that right?
What do you mean by implemented, sir?
What I mean by implemented is the guidance that was set forth in that legal memorandum was followed and put into action. Do you understand what I mean by implemented now, sir?
So you're asking me, was the memo followed? Was the memo followed by...
I'm not going to get into semantical games with you in this 5 minutes. I need you to answer the question or refuse to.
The Army had for decades a manual on interrogation. It approves 16 methods of interrogation. Rumsfeld then directed to expand the 16 methods of interrogation to 35, and that started our downfall.
I don't see people kind of bringing the nation to a halt in protest against what's being done to these detainees. And even decent people say that they can't get that worked up about it. I mean, these people are represented as the worst of the worst. So quite apart from the morality of the torture of prisoners in our custody, quite apart from the fact that the Constitution forbids cruel and unusual punishment, quite apart from the fact that it's against the law, U.S. law as well as international law. So why should we care that brown people with Muslim names are being tortured? We should care for our own sakes because of the record of history. When you look at Germany, you see this clear pattern. In 1930, 31, 32, torture was still illegal in Germany, but the SA, these informal paramilitary groups, would drag people out of halls like this one if they asked a confrontational question and take them to these makeshift torture